Hey Ashwin, good to see you in another session of our Edu Marketing Series. And the last time, if you remember, we spoke about the various stages in the student's journey. And also, very specifically, we delved deep into the research stage, which is the very first stage in the journey. So, for those of you who did miss out on the previous video, please head on to our YouTube page or our LinkedIn page to find that video so that you can bring yourself up to speed. And Ashwin, so I'm really excited as we are moving on to the second stage, and I'm really excited about all the examples that you're going to share. So before we get started, Ashwin, can you briefly elaborate for our audience what the evaluate stage actually consists of in the overall student's journey?
Perfect, Sujeevan. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for welcoming me in as well. Yet another episode. As excited to get started. Like you mentioned, of course, we've done the student journey introduction and the research stage earlier because it's available in our handles for people to understand. Let's dive deep into the evaluate stage. Now, there's the second stage in the journey where students generally have a ton of questions. They have questions that they need answers to,
Mhm.
and most of the times, because these are very early questions, right? They want minimal human interaction, like we mentioned about the self-serve model in the previous video,
That's
where
right.
now information is available for decision making. Students would love to receive this information. Personalized is key. I think we mentioned personalized as well. Personalized is important because they have specific questions that they need answers to, and if
Definitely.
these specific questions are answered, their conviction and their confidence to move towards the next step in the journey becomes a lot more convenient for their
Definitely.
decision making.
Definitely.
So personalized is key, and also extremely meaningful content in a way that it helps them take better decisions. Yeah.
Ashwin, is it right for us to tell that by this time the student has decided what kind of course they want to enroll into? There is a kind of an understanding of the direction in which the student wants to move, and actually they are trying to figure out how to move in that direction.
I wouldn't say they've taken a complete decision. I
Yes,
feel the decision making is still in progress. I
yes,
feel
that's
the
right.
decision is still not made until they complete this particular step, which is to evaluate and the app and the apply phase. Across this journey, they still have a lot of these questions, but it's very important to be able to answer to these queries at this stage, at a very early stage in their journey, because it helps students become, like we mentioned earlier, get more confident, get more conviction. And if you think about the challenge from the other side, which is for marketing and admissions professionals, right,
Mhm.
these questions are more often repeated.
Yeah,
Every time they have a call with a prospective student, they've already answered some of these questions in their previous calls, so they have to keep consistently going about trying to resolve the same set of queries over and over again, which I think becomes a mundane process for admissions and marketing professionals as well. I think the goal of this stage and why these tools become very critical are there is there an ecosystem of capabilities that are available for
mhm.
universities, colleges, institutions to pick up, so that they're able to solve for most of these repetitive mundane queries which are very critical for students.
That's
But
correct.
admissions professionals and marketing professionals in universities have been there and done that before.
Yes.
And I think this is where we come to a very interesting couple of examples that I'd love to showcase that I think sheds a light on what we're discussing so far. Yeah.
Great, Ashwin. So before we move there, just to summarize, now a lot of educational institutions are also looking at efficiency as a goal in their
Mm,
operations.
mm,
They don't
mm.
want to add on more admissions people to cater to the requirements or the calls from their prospective students as they increase their demand generation activities. So we also have to look at other tools and ways that can bring about efficiency. So I think that is the kind of approach that we have taken to this discussion. And
Absolutely.
I'm really eager to see the global and local examples that you're going to share with us.
Just to emphasize on what you said
Mhm.
now, some universities have lead qualification team, which
That's
is
right.
purely focused on trying to qualify students
Mm-hmm.
so that they go to the right admissions team for
Mm-hmm.
further conversations. You might have a team that's dedicated to a particular category of choice, of program, of region. You might have an Indian team, you might have an African team, you might have a local UAE team, all that. So there's a pre-qualification team. Now this pre-qualification team has a huge responsibility, right? Because it's important for them to filter the right set of leads, intent leads, warm leads to the marketing and admissions teams. At the same time, they, like we mentioned, they have to go through this mundane job of qualification as well.
That's
Yeah,
right.
and that's why we want to see if we can bridge this gap. By how are we bridging this gap? By providing value in terms of information for students at this evaluation stage, where they have a lot of questions that they need answers to, meaningful questions. Now let's dive into the example like we mentioned before. So let's talk about London Business School. Yeah, they have an executive MBA program that's available in Dubai. Now,
Mhm.
what gets extremely interesting is they have a series of questions. I'd love to read some of these to understand the quality of questions and how they're trying to bridge this gap. What's the difference between London and Dubai streams of executive MBA? Definite question, right?
Definitely.
Should I study in
Definitely.
London? Should I study in Dubai? Is it
Definitely.
possible to do the executive MBA if I don't study in London or Dubai? And look at this, right? They even have a question on what's the difference between full-time MBA and executive MBA. Now, these questions are very important because not all of these questions students have concerns on. But when they start reading this repository of questions, they are
Mhm.
intrigued to understand and find solutions of questions that they might have in the future as well, that they
That's
can
correct.
resolve to today. So one set is a series of extremely generic information. How can I find more information? All that is beautiful. Now they've divided FAQs based on multiple criterias. One criteria is program content and learning experience, purely focused on program and learning. Look at this question. What is the in company project like? How is the curriculum? What format are the electives offered in?
Yeah, what
How
is astounding is to understand how universities or institutions are leveraging this information or the content
Mhm.
to basically address an important need in the student's journey, because practically when calling a student admission counselor, the student will not have all these questions readily available. Sometimes you keep the phone and then you imagine, you wonder, okay, I had this question in my mind, am I going to call them back? No. So there are a lot of friction points such as these, which actually are being addressed in this content, which I feel is a great way to, again, going back to the self service model, anyone can actually access these questions and exploit at their own pace.
And it's also difficult for admissions and marketing professionals to answer these questions as well on point, right? They might
100%.
have to come back to students as well at at a later stage, because all of
Definitely.
these questions are constantly updated. So it's very
Yes, of
important. So
course.
this repository is very important. It's
Definitely.
important to keep updating this repository of information, and like
Mhm.
you said, it's important to keep it available so that students are able to come to this page, absorb these questions, understand the answers to them. Now, when and look at all of these answers, right? They're all bite-sized. They're not very heavy, 500-word answers. They're 100 less than 100-word answers, very straightforward, on point. So they can come
Amazing.
at a later stage, save this, come at a later stage, and try to get answers to at different stages of their journey. And
That's right.
next category, class profile and career impact. Sujeevan, did you have something when you were looking for an MBA, mate?
No, not really.
So
Not
what did you
really.
do? What did
Most
you do?
most of the questions were through my friends and the network, but it was a time consuming process, I should say, because the only way you could gather information, unfortunately, it was about 3 years ago. At that time, and also being in Sri Lanka, you didn't have a lot of advanced content that you can find on these MBAs. So the most reliable source was going to a friend. and understanding, okay, what is your experience, who's the person who has studied in this university that I could reach out to. But I would say it
Absolutely.
was a very painstaking process. And especially in Dubai, right, most of them come to Dubai as a transition location, so they're not going to be here in Dubai forever. So most of them come from different countries, they start expanding on their academic horizon, so they don't have this network that they can rely on mostly, and they don't have a person from the alumni or whatever. So university is taking this kind of initiative to put this information that is much required in the decision making process, comes in really handy, I should say, Ashwin.
Absolutely. And I also feel that agree to completely what you're saying. And I think what you mentioned is something that's very interesting, which is talk to somebody from the alumni, which we
Hmm.
will cover in our next stage, which is the apply stage. But that being said, I think a lot of universities also feel that, okay, we've created a brochure. The brochure has all the information.
Hmm.
Students should be reading the brochure. Doesn't work that way, right? Because consumption of content is has changed dramatically over the last few years, and now
That's right.
video content and bite-sized content is what people absorb, because it's the era of TikTok, right? So
Yeah,
you
yeah.
so you want to so you want to ensure that you constantly give them information, at the same time information that is digestible, that they can understand and they can make a decision on. Look at that, immediately next category: admissions and applications process, GMAT score, GRE score, TOEFL application fee. How do I waive my application fee? How do I apply? What happens if it's not accepted? If it's accepted, you
I
see
should
how
say
they
this
are.
is very elaborate, well structured, divided into all the key topics. And I should say this brand clearly understands that getting a person onto your website is just one third of the job. Getting them to convert on your website is the rest. Yeah. So I think these guys have
Absolutely.
done a fantastic job there. Yeah,
Absolutely. And fees, financing, more categories into the ecosystem as well. And
definitely.
see, now when you've gone through all of this, and then when you have more questions, it's a
Hmm.
great place to then contact them. I think they've done a good job with trying to curate this, build it, put it onto their website and make it accessible, so that
Definitely.
students are able to get this information.
Definitely. So thank
Now,
you for this, Ashwin. Are there any other capabilities that we can actually show our audience that will be useful to especially target someone who's in the evaluate stage?
great. We spoke about this sometime back as well, where we said, okay, fine, you have questions on your website. Great, but I have to
Mhm,
come to your website, right? Which means, are there any other distribution channels of
mhm.
how students can get answers to the queries that they have? Simple. Now, of course, there's email marketing. There's been there traditionally, where emails are sent back and forth. Then
Mhm,
there is, people can do a lot of Zoom calls now. They can do video calls where they can book a time and they can shoot some questions and get resolutions.
mhm.
At the same time, you also have WhatsApp,
Yeah, that's
an
right.
extremely convenient tool. Everybody's on WhatsApp. You're on WhatsApp. I'm on WhatsApp. We use this tool day in and day out. And because it's always on your phone, it's completely accessible. And because it's so accessible, your ability to really ask questions, get clarifications whenever you. So, for example, I could be reading an article at, let's say, 12 p.m., midnight, and I have a question. Now, of course, I cannot talk to somebody. So I'll
Mhm.
definitely need to note down these questions somewhere, put it in a
Yes.
repository so that I can probably send an email after a couple of days, or the next day I send them some questions and all of that. If a brand was present on WhatsApp, now WhatsApp is a 24/7 platform. You're always on the platform. And if you're able to build a very interesting chatbot experience, chatbot is basically somebody that you can chat with, but it's a bot, because the
Mhm.
bot is trained to answer a series of questions. In that way, you'll be able to answer questions whenever, wherever the student is. Yeah,
Yes.
in spite of geography, in spite of the time, and you're always on his fingertips, literally.
That's
So
right.
I want to quickly introduce a platform called Gallbox. A lot of
Mhm,
people in the industry might have heard about the tool. It's not just Gallbox. There are a lot of other tools in the ecosystem that does a really good job. Gallbox resonated with us a lot more higher because they have a lot more expertise in the education industry. They understand problems of marketing admission professionals on one side, and they
Hmm.
understand students problems on the other. Yeah, great, cool. Let's get into the ecosystem now. What gets really interesting is, all right, provide 24/7 support, always be available, respond to questions, provide course details, provide admissions details, clarify common doubts, help select courses, position course fees. Now, all of these are questions that students have, right?
Hmm.
They talk about course, they talk about admissions, they talk about common questions, they talk about FAQs. And these questions are, like we mentioned earlier, 24/7,
That's right.
irrespective of location. So imagine if you had a very simple bot where you put in, where you fed all of these questions, answers to these questions, because when next time the student types these questions, they immediately are responded with relevant answers,
That's
relevant bite-sized answers, just like how we looked at the example at London Business School. They find answers, and that helps them go to the next question, go to the next stage, go to the helps them in decision making.
that's right.
Yeah. And that's the goal, of course, multilingual, all of that available. Now, what gets more interesting is, you can this WhatsApp tool can also be an application process where you can do the entire application process of uploading documents, asking questions around personal details, asking questions around as in program choices, intake information.
Hmm.
All of that can be part of WhatsApp as well. Now,
That's right.
remember, WhatsApp is not just a student to university conversation. It is also a university to student conversation.
That's right.
I'll give you an example. An open house is coming next week. This open house is for international students.
That's right.
What I can do is I can immediately send a notification on WhatsApp
Hmm.
to all prospective students saying that there's an international open house that's coming up.
That's great.
WhatsApp has way better click rates, WhatsApp has way better open rates, WhatsApp has way better
Definitely.
conversion rates
That's
compared to
right.
emails, which is your
100%.
alternative source. Yeah.
Alternative source. That's right.
Because
Yes.
WhatsApp is always on your fingertips. Yeah. You open WhatsApp every day. Yeah.
Definitely. It's about the affinity that you have for the application. So WhatsApp has become like part of our life. So we can't live without.
Absolutely. It's almost like a no-brainer, right, for brands to use it. And like we were talking about earlier, right, for the admissions team now it becomes so much more easier because
Mhm.
all of their questions are solved. Doesn't mean
Yes,
that it now this bot does not mean that they can never talk to admissions. They
that's
can
right.
talk to admissions when their question is not answered.
Correct.
So
Correct.
if their question is not answered, then when they connect to admissions, right,
That's true.
admissions also via WhatsApp, so admissions can still reply to students queries on WhatsApp as well. So
Definitely. Definitely.
in that way they are students are extremely well informed and they come for clarifications and further queries if required.
Definitely. And also, Ashwin, another interesting side of the equation that most people won't see is the amount of information on this prospective student that the brand can actually acquire in the process. Imagine the kind of preferences, the kind of consumer behavior, what are they leaning towards, what kind of course should we be selling, what kind of scholarship should we be targeting for the student. A lot of personalization can actually occur in the communication that basically precedes this. So there is
Extremely interesting perspective.
a lot
Extremely
of
interesting
data
perspective.
that you can actually mine, which you will not otherwise get. A student who is actually on your website, it's very difficult to track the kind of preferences or whatever in a platform like your website. But compared to that, the WhatsApp conversation or the chatbot becomes a solid tool where you can actually extract this information. Yeah.
For, just to
To
throw
make.
some light on that. For example, you want to understand from which countries scholarships are being seeked the most, from which
100%.
countries which programs have been seeked the most, from which country, from which state, which schools are actually showing more interest, students from
Definitely.
which schools, all of this information, and this information at a very early stage. See,
Definitely.
it's
Definitely.
more difficult to fill a form than to
Yes.
answer a question on WhatsApp.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So this information will be available for universities, institutions at a very early stage and not towards the fag end. So they're able.
And the beauty is you get all this information with very less friction. It's conversational.
So my marketing becomes a little bit more intelligent
Absolutely.
because of
Absolutely.
the information that I have today.
Definitely. So these tools not only help you stand out or differentiate yourselves, they also help you enrich your marketing. Yeah.
Absolutely. And
Yes.
I think some examples here would really resonate. A few
Great.
examples. One is the program inquiry bot, which is
Mhm.
trying to help offer the right set of courses for prospective students. The other is talking about an admissions bot, which is going through the entire admissions process within WhatsApp versus a website, having a login, having a logout, having to remind all of that. The other is
Mhm.
an FAQ bot, which is, like we mentioned earlier, questions all around FAQs, course fee bot, enough and more. So you can keep creating multiple bots that address different side, different categories of questions or solutions that you're offering, so that prospective students engage, find information, get answers to these queries, move from one step to the other in their journey. And at the same time, marketing and admissions professionals find it a lot more easier, because one is they can reach the student on their fingertips, so they're very happy.
That's
Next time
right.
when they message, students will reply or they will have a conversation. And the other is they are able to have information now before talking to students. They know
Definitely.
exactly what kind of information the students has been reading and what they need next, so that they're able to nurture and help them move to the next stage. Yeah.
Absolutely. So they are things become more predictable. I think predictable marketing is what results from these kind of exercises. And it's a very interesting discussion that we had, especially with these examples being shared, because most of the people who are watching this might not have had a discussion which gives them real world examples and discusses this topic to this depth. So thank you very much, Ashwin, for actually coming up with those great examples and helping our audiences gain a lot of value. So thank you very much for your time. And I really look forward to the next video which we will have, which will basically dissect the next stage in the students journey, which is the apply stage. So really looking forward to it.